Yeah. So anything of large public interest, that is
Yes.
news. Anyone else who would like to say something on this?
Hello, ma'am. I think news is anything that will make the reader or watcher surprised with the content base. It can be something interesting or anything that has happened in a country,
Hmm.
like a war or anything.
Right. So, what is a more important kind of news? Ukraine-Russia war is more important, or Israel being attacked yesterday is more important? Anything which has newness in it. That's one of the news values that we will learn once we proceed in this chapter. Anything which has any kind of newness in it will be a more important news than something which is slightly older. So say for example, Ukraine Russia war has been on for 2 years now. As compared to this, Israel has been attacked only yesterday. So Israel's news is more fresh and more important, and indicative of many things. So Hamas attacking Israel will make more newsy, will be more newsy for any news organization as compared to Russia Ukraine war. News is something new, says Napong. Strange or sudden happenings. Yes, true that. Anyone else who would like to tell us what news is? So news is anything which is of large public interest. There are certain kind of news values that are involved in it, like timeliness, prominence, and there are various others, human interest, so on and so forth. So whichever event meets more than one criteria of this is what you would call news. So the newness of it, the timeliness of it. So whenever you have stories around Christmas related to Christmas celebration or Eid celebration, or in India Diwali celebration, that also makes news. Or if something has been achieved, okay, we've been having the Asian Games, and cricket is now a part of the Asian Games. So that's news for everybody who is interested in cricket. So similarly, news is anything which is of large public interest. So when you browse through your chapter, your unit, you will come across multiple, aspects of what we can call news. So, like they say, news is what people want to read about themselves. When we say themselves, it means their community, their society, and everything which is around them, whatever knowledge they want to have, the information they want to have about the events which are happening around them, or nationally, internationally. That is it. So, news is essentially about people, events surrounding people, and places. All of them are correct definitions of news. So, news is a report of a recent event, intelligence, and information. So, any sort of intelligence that we get, because reporters do a lot of investigative pieces. So, whatever new intelligence they acquire and whatever new inputs they are able to add in that news, and the information which is available to us through the analysis of that intelligence, all makes news. Having said that, okay, there is another very pragmatic kind of a definition in your unit which says news is an account of an event which a newspaper prints in the belief that by doing so it will profit. So we all understand that all media are money making, money minting agencies. They are capital intensive, and they also look at generating more revenues. So for that, anything that will earn them a better profit, a better revenue, will be called news. So all right. And then there is also something called news sense. Any idea what is news sense? Anyone? Quick responses in the message box if anybody knows about this. What is news sense? News sense means The ability to judge news. Reporters, it is said, should always have a good sense of news sense should be strong, as in what kind of an event or what kind of a happening can be transformed into some news. That is called nose for news. That is the idea of having a judgment about which event can become news. And because not all recent happenings can be called news, news will only be those events which will be of large public interest, which are going to affect people at large. Okay, so there your judgment as a journalist, as a reporter, comes into picture. So uh, all right. A lot of times, newspapers used to sell, even now, for bad news more than good news. So, whenever you hear about some calamity, something which has gone wrong, some war which has begun between two countries, you are more interested in reading how it is happening or why it has happened or what can happen as a result of this. So, that is what is important. Then let us now discuss the elements of news writing, one of which is timeliness. News values and news elements are more or less similar. So ideally, the idea of having news elements means what are the ingredients that make news. Like when you cook food, there are certain ingredients that must go into it to make it palatable, nutritious, well cooked, etc. So, similarly, what is it which will make news? One of the things is timeliness. The time of occurrence of an event is very, very important because people want to know about an event that has taken place as quickly as possible. Now, anything which has happened yesterday or day before or some time back is of less importance. Why? Because your competitors have already covered that part. So once that part has been covered, it is less significant and it is less extraordinary, right? This is why the competition in media is so much. So that accounts for timeliness of an event. So anything, especially after coming off 24/7 news channels and after digitization of all the traditional media that we have, uh, after digitization of all traditional media that we have, this has become more important as to how soon can you let your people know, how soon can you let the clients, the customers, or the target audience know about a specific new event. So after that, we talk about proximity. Proximity is the closeness or nearness, as the word suggests. Proximity means closeness to somebody. So say for example, a lot of NRIs, non-resident Indians from the country, have settled in United States. All right, as compared to China, more of our people are in United States. Then so this, it'll be of despite the fact that something may be going wrong or something may be newsy that's happening in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is our immediate neighbor. The more preference would be given to a news that pertains to United States because more of our people are there. So when we talk about proximity, we talk about nearness from that point of view. Alternatively, say we share our boundary, India shares its boundary from the side of Himalayas with this small country called Nepal. So if we have an earthquake as Nepal, it is of immense value to us. Why? Because it is a geographical thing. While in the case of United States, it was more of an emotional thing. Here, it is more of a geographical, a demographical thing. Why? Because anything that is happening there, it is quite plausible that it may affect the northern part of our country, India. So that is what is called proximity, and that is why news sense is important. What kind of a news are you going to place first, or which is the kind of news which is going to get more importance as compared to the next, is something you should be clear about as a reporter, as a journalist. Then third is prominence. um, okay, so let's look at this example. There was a meeting, um, and many prime ministers and presidents of different countries had come. And if you hear of a bomb blast there, obviously that becomes one very prominent news. Why? Because leaders of countries were all at the same place and there has been a breach of security. So this is called prominence. This is one of the news elements or a news value. right? And then, of course, another important factor in this is dimension. Dimension is how many people. Like yesterday, what we are, what we are getting to know in Israel, while they attacked the groups that attacked Israel, killed more than a few thousand. I think it is spanning up to 1,000 or 2,000 people who've been killed there. So the dimension is gross. It is very big. So how many people are being affected by something is also important. So similarly, in the case of, say, for example, an earthquake which is measuring high, say for example 6.2 on the Richter scale, and it is promulgating from one state to many other states in the country, or a cyclone or something like that, any natural calamity, that is the dimension of this calamity. So that is what makes it more newsy. The more people who are around that place, or the more people who are being impacted by it, would like to see it in mainstream media as to how much or how many people have been affected, how much has been the impact. So that is dimension. The next thing is impact. Impact is, say, for example, um, greater taxes on trade, between two friendly countries is going to impact it. Like, I will give you another example. While the Ukraine Russia war broke out, everybody, most countries amongst the West, said that we will not buy oil from Russia. All right. So what was the idea? The idea was to that the Russian economy be impacted. And what did the country do? Our country, we decided to import oil from Russia, and in turn, we sold it out to other countries. For some time, this arrangement was going on. So the impact that we're talking about, of a particular happening was obliterated through that. Why? Because the idea was to kill one economy, and another country maybe saw some good what do we say, a good opportunity in it. And because there was an opportunity, people were more interested in making money out of it. So how is something going to impact, and how big the impact would be? Had Russian oil not reached different countries, probably there would have been a huge shortage of oil, because it is only two countries, which is one of which is Iran and Iraq, which have the largest oil reserves, and then another one is Russia. So that would have led to the rise of oil prices across the globe. This could have been the impact. And of course, the oil prices rose. Not that the ban that the Western countries had did not have any effect. It did. And due to that, the prices of oil soared all across. So this is the impact. And then, of course, it is human interest. Um, Now, human interest is something which is to be pondered over when we look at it from the perspective of kindness, from the perspective of all those values that makes us human beings. So, anybody, say, for example, a visually challenged person performing an act, or anything, or climbing the Mount Everest, or doing something like that. A woman who has been in our society, say a downtrodden woman, and then how she rose up to be an entrepreneur. That is a story of human interest, and that will also find place in all news media. So those are a few things. Then also we talk about conflict. Any sort of conflict makes a lot of news. It could be religious or sectarian conflict. It could be an international war, the kinds we are having right now. It could be political, social, communal, religious, anything. So any sort of conflict will also make news. Uh, Another element in news could be adventure. You would always, come across columns in the magazine section of the newspaper, or blogs, or such other things are also present on Facebook and other social media, well, whereby people will tell you about their adventurous trips. People will tell you about maybe a 70-year-old woman climbing up a mountain. and stuff like that. So all those adventure kind of things also rattle the human mind, and hence they make news. So the idea is, what is the idea? The idea is to impart information in a way that it is palatable, and also in a way that large number of people would be interested or curious, simply curious to know about it or read it or see the story, etc. Then of course novelty is one thing. So just to exemplify, the first time when this engineer from Google said that the computers are going sapient, which means they are understanding more than what they are programmed for. Yeah, so that was something which was absolutely novel. So far we were only talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning and Internet of Things and everything, but here we were a step ahead. So what does it mean? Does it mean that all those films that we once used to see, that machines are overpowering the human beings, is it all going to come true? We don't know, but definitely this is one angle of novelty due to which it will find a place for itself in all news media. So that's an example of novelty and how novelty is an element of news. Then empathy. Empathy is quite connected to human interest. So whenever, war-torn country, and how is the economy pulling up? How are people making their ends meet? What happens when, a state like Mizoram in India, one of the northeast states, is burning, and the leaders of the country are not doing anything about it? So all of it amounts to empathy. The word empathy, you would all know, means to feel like or to understand how the other person must be feeling, to step into someone else's shoes. That's called empathy. And empathy also, to a large extent, makes news. So whenever we're trying to talk about, you've seen all soft stories, or you've read of all the soft stories where people tell you how small businesses are rising, or how the rural belt is coming up with newer business ideas, and with the help of government they are being supported to become entrepreneurs. All of it is an example of empathy, because we all want to see and know about our society progressing. The downtrodden, the underprivileged should progress, and hence empathy. So, and of course, weather and climate and environment. And environment is a global concern these days. We all know that, and it has been so for a number of years. It will continue to be until all the countries together decide to reduce the carbon footprints that they're creating due to various industrialization, whatever modernization processes they're going through, whatever be that, or too much of population burden, etc. So weather, climate, and environment always makes news. Earlier, if I can recall correctly, whenever we had to travel, it was only the vacations and holidays that we used to look at. Now, if you have to plan a travel, you also have to see whether the weather, because weather is not the way it was once upon a time. Seasons are not fixed anymore. So at the time when you least expect rains, you see rains there. And all of it is because of climate change which is taking place. So climate and environment and weather is also an important consideration when we talk about news in any media. So those were some of the important elements of news. And then I'll also talk about some principles of news writing. These are not fairly new. They've been there for quite some time now. And that is how news media used to operate as, for as long as there was no digital media. I'll tell you why. Now, when I'm talking about these techniques of news writing, I am essentially focusing on 5 W's and 1 H. What are those 5 W's? What happened? When did it happen? Why did it happen? Where did it happen? And H stands for how did it happen? So these are the 5 W's and 1 H, the answer to which provides you an insight into any kind of situation, any kind of newscape that you are talking about. So if an accident took place, where did it take place? How did it happen? What time did it take place? Who all died? Who was involved in it? All of it together makes for techniques of news writing. So, and what do I mean by this? Whenever we have this preliminary information, this is the most important part of any news that has happened. ranging from Israel being attacked to a small accident that has taken place in a nearby street, anywhere. So these are the most important aspects. So previously, before the advent of digital media, people used to, make a news only depending on these factors, and they used to be arranged in an inverted pyramid style, the meaning of which is that the most important W or H and H would come first. So the first or the opening paragraph would clearly announce what has happened or how it has happened or what magnitude did the story have, whatever it was. All right, and then in the succeeding paragraphs you would find the lesser details, less important details, not the lesser details, the less important details. Also, the news piece had a structure to itself. It would have an introduction and a body and a conclusion, right? Of course the paragraphs could be three or more, but the idea was, because there is always a restraint of space in the newspapers or time on the news channels, so you always give out the more prominent details about a story first, right? And that is what we call 5 Ws and 1 H, which is the technique of writing, and we call this the inverted pyramid style of writing, whereby the more important aspects of a story are highlighted first and foremost in the opening paragraphs itself, and later on you come up with the lesser details or the less important details. Also, because whenever your news piece is going for an edit, it is always possible that at the last minute it gets cut. So it is easier to cut from beneath. So whenever the editor has to apply a scissor, it will be from the bottom paragraph, so that all the important aspects of that news continues to stay in the topmost paragraphs. So that is about the principles and techniques of news writing. Yes, another important thing, because I was saying that after coming of digital media, this has not remained the way, is because long form journalism has come into picture. With the coming of, one thing is that every newspaper, every news channel has a digital arm, okay, and they also have an Insta handle, they also have a Twitter, and this and that, everything. Now, whatever was possible for a newspaper, say for example in India we have a Times of India. So if for Times of India, whatever they can depict through a story or maybe through a photograph or a caption with it, that is it. But when we go to the Times of India, indiatimes.com, you would probably find the story along with an audiovisual clip, along with, and plus digital means there is no restraint of how much you want to write. Though of course you have to keep in mind that the attention span of the viewer, of the reader, is not unlimited. So once they see that there are lesser number of facts given in the story, they would probably squirm off it. So it is important to understand why we are talking about inverted pyramid. And when I talk about long form journalism, though of course I don't think it is a part of your unit, but just to let you know, long form journalism is when you are placing the background information, and then in the light of it, when you're explaining the current event or information, and then you are also analyzing it for the audiences. You are giving them an analytical part, which is talking about why something has taken place or why something has happened or what can be the future. So if we discuss the Israel war, the Hamas attack on Israel, what can be the future implications? Are we going towards another world war, since the Ukraine Russia war hasn't stopped for 2 years now, and then we also have this war coming up? Israel is not the kind of country which is going to sit quietly. So, how do we look at that? It is important to analyze. So, all of it together forms long form journalism, as compared to when I simply state what happened. Hamas attacked Israel. So many people were killed. The attack took place at this and such time. So here I'm only giving the basic nuggets of information, okay? The 5 Ws and 1 H. But as compared to this, when I talk about long form journalism, I am trying to look at it from the historical point of view, from how the history between Israel and Palestine has been, and what has been the cause of all this war. There has been just a small place where they have their mosque and all, which is the reason why they keep fighting, just like India and Pakistan keeps fighting. So when you're giving this background information, it is long form journalism. All right. And as you proceed in this unit, you will also come across process of news writing, as in how do chronologically, how do we, explain. Like I said, the more important things obviously go first in the first opening paragraph, and later on, the less important things keep coming. So, and the last bit, if you really want to interpret this for the readers or the viewers, that has to be the last thing. So that if something has to be snipped off, it has to be this last bit. All right, you can obviously let people make sense out of it, or if the story is important, in a follow-up story you can present the analysis of this or how it impacts the audiences, etc. Then there is something which is history of inverted pyramid, which I will not spend time on. I think when you read through this unit, you can go through what the history of this is, how it promulgated, how it evolved, and why we're talking about historical, inverted pyramid style of writing, why it has been a part of news writing for such a long time. Okay, and there is also a small critique which is present. With that, we end this first unit. Now, what I want you to do is looking at these 5 W's and an H, and looking at the elements of news that we discussed. You can pull out any 2 or 3 news items and see what is the lead. What is the more, like if I say Israel-Palestine war, it is what the war. That is important. So I want you to point out which W or H is the focus in any story, which is the prime focus, I mean. All right, and which element is the story playing with? Is it talking about conflict, like in Israel Palestine case it is conflict, right? Is it human interest? Is it something else? What is that aspect? And in case you do not have your unit or the study material right now in front of you, I will just list down the news elements among which you will have to figure out which news story has which news element, and which is the more important W, which is the more important W or H in that story. Am I clear? Am I clear? Yes. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. I will just list down those elements. I am not writing empathy here because you can consider empathy in human interest itself. Have you all done, or does it require a few more minutes? Is anyone facing some problem? Or are you able to do this?
I'm able to do it, ma'am, but taking some time to work it out.
Okay. Just dig out one or two stories if it is taking too long. It's okay. You'll have to run through the story, of course. What I can see is most of you, I mean, I've just read too. So you're able to point out the why, what, when. So five W's and one H, you're able to point out. But when it comes to the news value or the news element, which has been stressed upon or which dominates in the story, the way of looking at it is this: you should see whether it can be made hard news. What is it that will make it a hard news? And if you think that it is only human interest, then we should know that human interest stories can be published even after a fortnight. You know, it does not make it a hard news. So human interest will essentially be attributed to soft news. Okay. Conflict to the world is more important than human interest. So the dominant theme would be conflict, not human interest. It's just that now we are not sure whether this guy who is General Abdul Al Burhan, whatever he's saying, and he's saying that there will be a humanitarian disaster if we continue with the war. This is something, which is of less interest from human interest point of view as much as it is politically, because it is showing that one country is showing some concern towards the uprising and towards the kind of impact the war or the conflict may have on the nations. So it is important to know which is the more dominant one as compared to the other one. If it is human interest, then it can be a soft story, which means that the time of publication can be delayed. The story can come after 15 days, it can come after a week, it can even come next month. But if you think that it is an important story which cannot be negated, which must find a place in your publication, then there has to be some other human and some other element of news which should be focused on. Anyone else would like to share? We'll wait for 5 more minutes, after which we will proceed with the next. All right. And which is the news element? The story is fine, Nopong. You need to tell us which is the prominent W or Y, and W or how, and what is the dominant element or the news value in this.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, please, you're audible.
Great. So I think I prefer to share by voice. This was a national news that was shocking to the entire nation. So the impact was very great. It was felt from the top to the down level. So that was one impact. The news element was also unexpected. Actually, most of the people were not aware he was even sick. So and when you look at who was involved, the president at that time, he was a sitting president of the country. And so, where did it happen? It happened in one of the hospitals in Accra. Oh, okay. So this was actually a breaking news that came, and then
So
people
the
were actually
element
shocked.
you have pointed out correctly, the element is prominence, all right. And it
Yeah,
answers the most dominant question that is being answered here is what? What has happened? All right.
what has happened?
Yeah. So this is how you need to pull out from all the stories, all of you. I think we've had enough examples now and you're able to do this. So this is how you need to pull out which is the more dominant news value or news element in the news, and then which W or Y should be kept, on the top, so that if the last paragraph has to be cut down, what is it that remains in the story? All right. So always, whenever as a journalist, we have to think about how the editor is going to do it. So with that, we start with the second unit of this, and this talks about news sources. Now, news sources is this, area, is this chapter, this unit, which you will have to largely read yourself, because uh, like when we talk about news sources, what exactly are they? These are the sources of getting information for the journalist or the reporter. Now, these can be both official as well as unofficial. So, while official, sources can be quoted, unofficial services either they ask not to be quoted, or it might get the source in danger. As a result of which, the journalist has every right to protect his sources and may not reveal the name. Yet, credibility, in the same breath, I would like to stress that credibility of a story only comes by when it is attributed to some source. So you will have a mix of both kind of sources. You will have some sources who would like to be quoted, who would like to be named, or are official sources. The way everybody is getting information from official sources, you get it too, and then you put it in your story. Or if it is some really important bit of information which the person who is giving you that information would not like his name revealed, in that case it is the journalist's duty to protect the sources. So also this unit will talk about news agencies, and it'll talk about the historical concept of news agency, how the rise and consolidation of news agencies took place, and what were the cartels, and how did in the 1970s, how did it start happening in the United States, and how developing countries were finding it a monopoly. All the important international news agencies were giving out information and news, and the news of developing countries like India, like the African countries, was not finding any place in the international news, which meant we did not exist for them. So how did countries like ours, the developing countries, fight against this? Or what is it that we like? When we had Pandit Nehru as our prime minister, he talked about NAM pool, non-aligned movement pool. So this was, what was the basic idea? The idea was that the Western news agencies were rich. The AP, the AFP, Agency France Press, Associated Press, Reuters, British Broadcasting Corporation. So these were four, five, six agencies, the dominant six they used to call them, who used to dominate. And the way they would like to give out news is how it would reach the entire world. So in India, we started on with this concept that let us combine our resources, so that if there are places in Nigeria, in Ghana, in anywhere else, um, people who are stationed there can give us their news, and we in turn, wherever our people are placed, we will give their news to them, so we can collaborate on the sharing of news. This was called the NAM pool, and this happened only after UNESCO's free flow ideology started coming up. So there was something called NWICO, New World Information and Communication Order, where this was noticed very vividly that there are these top six news agencies of the world who are promulgating any kind of news that they think is according to them correct, and which supports their country or helps their particular countries. So they did not look at how this is going to impact the third world or the developing countries, or the fact that the news of developing countries never reached the globe. So that was as a result of this McBride Commission report. McBride Commission report came up, which talked about balancing the flow of news and how news should be coming from different areas and how everybody should be adequately represented, how the third world should be represented. So it talked about that. So this was the New World Information and Communication Order. This was around the year 1978 that it came, but it still holds good even to this date. Of course, there is proliferation of digital media and social media everywhere, so things are kind of changing. But nevertheless, see, if you would notice, in any war torn place, or any place where there is any kind of conflict, political conflict or political upheaval, the first thing that is done is you shut down the internet. The government shuts down the internet, because internet is the biggest source where user generated content and videos start floating, and people, you're able to get a live glimpse of what's happening in some part of the world, right? So that is what, up till the emergence of digital media, people were talking about New World Information and Communication Order and how we should share our resources and stuff like that. Now it is who controls the flow of information through the digital modes. Okay. Then this unit is also going to talk about wire copies, as in, wire is all the news agencies who have wire services everywhere. So any news that is happening in Washington, or any news that is happening in UK, or any other part of the globe, will come to us through these wire services. Why? Because we have set up, either we have our bureaus, news bureaus over there, or we have entered into collaborations and agreements with people there who will send us, wire us the copies. So those are called wire copies. So the second unit will largely talk about wire copies, and it will talk about the news agencies of India, like Press Trust of India or United News International, or it will talk about Bhasha, Varta, all those news agencies. Here, you can please feel free to replace this information with the information of your own country. So your news agencies, the national news agencies, the ones that work according to the government, and the private ones, all of them you can talk about here. But please make sure that you run through this, because it is not just the news agency aspect in it. It is also talking about how do we gather news, and why is production of sources important, or why time is of supreme value, because anything which is stale does not get sold until and unless it is soft news, which can also be published after a month. So those things you have to look at. And then talking about sources, we're talking about individual sources, we are talking about bureau reports, and online sources, and social media platforms. These are the three kinds of sources that are being talked about here. When we talk about individual sources, it could be a person in chair, a credible source of information who would, or somebody who who can lay eyes on the correct information in the files in government offices, and then is speaking to the press or the media. That is an individual source. Again, like I said, it could be they might or might not like their identity to be revealed, so accordingly the journalist covers it up. The second is the bureau reports. Like, if I talk in context of India, we are such a varied and a big country. Every media organization will have an office in Delhi or around Delhi. But when it comes to the Northeast, the Seven Sisters, which are, they share their boundaries with China and those places, how do we cover them? We usually set up a bureau over there. A bureau is a small office of a news channel or a newspaper. And this small office will have they will have a few stringers who they will depend on. These stringers are the local people of that place who would be paid on a story basis. So if somebody has been able to cover something or bring up a story along with a video, I pay that person a certain amount of money. So for money, they are enrolled with us. They are not direct employees of the media organization. Okay. And the bureau is always headed by a bureau chief. They have a small, team of people who work there, and yes, and that they depend on stringers a lot. Then After bureau, we have online sources and social media platforms. And this is something that I don't really have to tell you. We all know about user generated content. We also know about citizen journalism, whereby whenever you see something happening, you quickly take out your phone and make a video. And then your video goes viral, or you send that video to a certain news agency or a news organization. And that is how it gets taken up. A number of times, the citizen journalists are also paid in case their story is important, vibrant, and carries vital information. So, the next part of this chapter or the unit deals with source media relationship and roles. Now, this is something which is more conceptual or perspective, which is more conceptual in nature, because it talks about plurality. It talks about the Marxist idea and the neo-Marxism, which has emanated from it. So the relationship of the source and media needs some examination, is what this aspect is, what this topic stressing on. So how many, when you perform, you do an investigation, there are various socio-psychological forces that are coming into being. Also, there are some politico-economic sources that are ruling the roost. So in such kind of a case, how do you manage with one hand on the sources and the kind of information which could be sensitive information, which could be classified information? The journalist not only has to save the source, he or she also has to save their own skin. You cannot come up with a classified information and publish it as a part of your news report, because it could have a direct bearing on the security of the country, or the security of a certain section of the country. So how much to reveal, how to use the information, how to protect your sources is important for any journalist to know. Then, besides the source media relationship, there is another aspect of reliability and credibility of sources. A number of times people try to hoodwink. People might not give the exact information, or people might give wrongful information in order to serve their own vested interests. So a journalist from that point of view has to cross-check, verify, and only then go ahead with the publishing. Because if the journalist misses upon this, you may very well end up losing your job. So that is one thing. When I talk about credible and reliable sources, there are a few sources listed here, like the government sources, the party spokespersons, ministers, officials, bureaucrats, all those people who are in the chair and who have the authority to talk on that subject are all credible and reliable. So what does it mean? Just to exemplify, if I have to understand how many people have died due to corona in phase 1, 2020, and in 2021, phase 2, who is the correct person for me to go to? Somebody in the health ministry, or somebody who looks after the health affairs, or looks at the health or communication and health researches? Are the appropriate people credible, reliable sources for me to speak? So that is what this unit talks about. And with that, we come to the end of sources. After this, there are two units which are talking about newsroom setup and functions. Okay. These are small units, but basically what they talk about is what is the kind of structure that any media organization has. Like when it is print and online, how is it different? And when it is radio or TV, how it is different. So this is very much, about the functions of a newsroom, the editorial structure of the newspaper, as in who heads it, the editor, who comes after the editor, the news editor and the special correspondent and somebody. So it is basically that structure, that hierarchy. Please excuse me. So it is that hierarchy and how people operate in that hierarchy. So to begin with, let us look at the functions of a newsroom. I think it is quite simple. Once you go through it, once you read it, you will be able to gather an understanding of this. But yet, since we are here for this session, let me also run through it once so that if you have any questions, you may very well ask. And please feel free to replace this structure with the structure of media organizations in your particular countries. Okay. Alternatively, if you don't find them, you want to stick to what is given in these units, you're very welcome to do that as well. So, okay, so we are going to look at some of the editorial staff, like the copy editor or the sub editor, the senior sub editor, and the chief sub editor. Then we are also looking at the news editor. So, news editor and the chief sub editor, those are two important people who come right under the editor. And these are the people who decide what will go into different news pages of the newspaper. So the first thing is, of course, news gathering. We know that news gathering is something which is the role of reporters. So once they come from, and if you remember the gatekeeping model that we talked about while we were studying MJM20, we said that there is a there is gatekeeping which is done at various stages in a news organization. So while you will see gatekeeping happening at the first gatekeeper is the sub editor. Maybe the story which has been covered is not in direct connivance with the theme of the newspaper, or it could be, it could lead to the newspaper being in a soup because of taking a certain stand or because of covering a certain kind of story, since it is anti-government. So there can be multiple factors why gatekeeping needs to be done. Another important aspect is the space. I told you already that space is something which decides how much a story would be portrayed in a newspaper, or how much time do we have in a news channel to talk about a certain story. So news gathering is one thing, after which the chopping of the story begins. Also, you have to make it more readable, simple, easily understandable, and hence the sub editors are going to work on it. Once the sub editor who specializes in the field that you have covered the story on has done his bit of job, then it has to be, it is up to the news editor how or where the story will be placed. Maybe what has been edited is a 3-column story, but it will have to be reduced to 2-column or even 1 column sometimes if the space doesn't allow. A number of times a story is either not covered, which means killed, or covered only in a certain way, because it is important that whatever is the need of the newspaper, the in accordance with the government, should be met. Because if there will be undue pressures from the government, they will make life difficult for the newspaper. So that too happens. Nevertheless, in vibrant democracies, there are always newspapers who will oppose the government. And the greater the opposition, the better it is, because this is the only way, the fourth pillar of democracy, which is what we call media, keeps the legislative in check. So then it is news selection. I told you about it. News editing and page designing and layout. Yes. A number of times a story needs to be, like I was telling you about scrapping of the last paragraph. It happens when there is less space. You cannot refuse the advertisements. The more the advertisements, the better your revenue gets. Yeah. So where does a newspaper get its revenue from? Only two sources. One is the subscription. The other is the advertisement. So while we are looking at this, we also need to understand how page layout and page design is also an important aspect. The last one, of course, where the story gets cut or it is scrapped, a certain paragraph or more gets scrapped there. So for different reasons and for different nature of the story, a story will face right from making it more palatable to the fact that we have to exist in the society itself of which we are a part. And we cannot negate polity, we cannot negate economy, we cannot negate the society. So keeping everything in mind, the news story gets edited, the news story gets if reasonably shortened whenever required. Okay. And at times it also happens that important stories can get scraped completely, because something which is of greater magnitude or a more public interest will crop up and will find more space. And I do not know if you've heard of the concept of stop press, but stop press is the action which is taken in the middle of the night, right before a newspaper is getting into print. So right before that, if there is a very important, like this Ghana's president, the 68-year-old president dies, and suddenly this comes to the media, you will have to stop press. You will have to cancel out your front page story and replace it with the death of the president, right? And I'm talking about Ghana newspapers, if it is not so for newspapers in other countries. So this is the way a newsroom functions. And then finally, after getting a nod from the news editor, those pages go into print. As compared to this, I do not know if this part is also covered in this. Actually, yeah. Then there is also an editorial structure of a newspaper, which works on the basis of editor or chief editor or editor-in-chief, and then the executive editor. So there are various hierarchies of editors there. Why? Because we cannot afford a mistake in the newspaper. Despite everything, we do see language errors sometimes, unlikely though they may be. But editorial hierarchies help to bring in the various perspectives that a story should be looked at from the point of view of the newspaper, from the point of view of the society. So we have an editor-in-chief, we have an executive editor who's going to initiate everything and get everything in place so that the chief editor can take a call on it. And of course, the resident editor. Now, resident editor is a concept that you should know. A resident editor is a person wherever there are multi-edition newspapers, there we require resident editors. So what does this mean? This means in a large country like ours, we have a Times of India, which is being published in Delhi and covering 4 or 5 states. Then also there is a Times of India Bombay. That is a different edition. And then somewhere in the Northeast, it can be a different. So any multiple edition, like a bureau, when we have bureau, why do we need a bureau? Because we are not able to cover all the entire area. So for limited areas, we make small bureaus. Similarly, there are resident editors who will look at different editions of the newspaper. A newspaper which is coming out from the Northeast, a newspaper which is coming from the southern states of India, a newspaper that is coming from the North. There can be multiple editions of a certain newspaper. And what decides how many editions a newspaper may have? It is not just the geographical state, it is also the number of readers that are coming to you. So say, for example, from Gujarat and Rajasthan, which are 2 adjoining states of the country, with similar culture in to some extent. So you may have one edition which is only covering Rajasthan and Gujarat. As compared to this, when we're talking Delhi and Haryana and Punjab, there can be, a different edition which is looking at these states. So depending upon your readership, you decide how many editions would be there. Okay. So for every edition, there is a resident editor. So, and of course, there are assistant editors and news editors. Assistant editors are the ones that help with the story. This story could be your editorial writing also. So a lot of people feel that the editorial is always written by the editor. No, that is not the fact. An editorial is written by a assistant editor. Okay. And how is it the story decided? A few hours before the newspaper goes into print, there is a meeting held in the editor's room whereby whatever are the important events that have taken place, whatever is the important news is highlighted, it is being discussed about, and the most important news according to that media, according to that organization, is picked up for writing the editorial. An editorial is not the opinion of the editor. An editorial is the opinion of the newspaper. Having said that, the perspective from which the editorial will be written is also decided right then and there, because if it is a pro-government newspaper, they will not be able to afford to write anything anti-government. And if it is anti-government, what should we not write so that we do not, incite any kind of media laws against us, is something which needs to be decided. So this is the editorial structure. All right. So once you run through it, you will get to know both the hierarchy as well as the functions. And this has been diagrammatically presented in this chapter. So it will make it easy for you to understand who comes under what, to understand the hierarchy. Because most of the times, whenever this kind of a question comes, it will ask you to give a diagrammatic representation of what you're saying. So, which has been put up here in the unit. So you should go through this, and it'll be more fruitful for you if you can figure out the same thing for your country rather than understanding a different country's media setup. Okay. All right. Then we also have a reporting wing. This is a section that talks about reporting wing and news wing. So when we talk about news wing, we know that a newspaper has various sections. It has a business section, it has an international section, it has a sports section. Each of it is a news wing. So accordingly, the amount of space that it gets in the newspaper, like business news would get 2 or 3 pages, sports would again get 2 or 3, city news would get 1 or 2, international would also get 1 or 2. That is the way Indian newspapers are. So that is the news wing, various news wings that operate together so that at the end we are able to come out with the final product. And then there is also a reporting wing. Now, this reporting wing, like I said, wherever we have a bureau chief. And then there are also special correspondents. So since we also cannot make bureaus everywhere, yeah. So in some of the European countries or in the US, some important newspapers, the big daddies of newspapers, are going to place their special correspondents there. Or if something important is going to happen, say for example the US presidential elections, then we are going to have a special correspondent placed there for 1 or 2 months. So this is how special correspondents act. And of course, special correspondents are the senior journalists, very senior, who have an understanding, who have that kind of experience, who know, what to cover, how to cover, and what is it that my media house is going to need from me. Then, of course, we have chief reporter, who looks after all the stories that the reporters bring to him, and which all sections do they fall under, which is important, which should be cut out, which is it which can be expanded more. So, which is the one which should go with a photograph and a caption, which is the one which can do without a photograph, etc. Then you also have senior reporters, stringers. I explained the concept of stringers to you, the freelancers who work for some fee per story. Okay. And then there are news agencies, like I've already told. So this is it. A photography wing is also being talked about, and I don't think I need to explain much of this. Who is a photo editor? There's a camera person. Most of the times, now with the coming of mobiles, the reporter clicks pictures on his own. Otherwise, there was, always a journalist. Even today, for TV news, you have a journalist followed by a camera person. So the videos as well as photographs can, be got out of them. And then there is desktop publishing wing. The actual publication of the newspaper, how does it take place? How do you balance the colors? How do you balance the, how do you make the page? And then how do you print it? Of course, today it has all become so computerized. So it is much simpler than how it used to happen. And then they're also talking in the same breath about a magazine. Like so far, we've been talking about a newspaper. The difference between newspaper and magazine is that a newspaper has a smaller shelf life as compared to a magazine. A magazine obviously has a greater shelf life. If you talk about a weekly magazine, obviously the shelf life of this magazine is at least 1 week. If it is fortnightly, the shelf life is 15 days. So there's a small structure for these as well, as in the editing desk, because in magazines there are just 2 kinds of desks that are required. One is the editing desk, the other is the reporting wing. So those people who are writing stories, what is the story? Since it is a weekly magazine or a fortnightly magazine, whatever have been the events of the past 15 days are what the journalists are going to work on, dig facts, research, and write a complete full article which has all the requisite information and facts along with background information, right? And then it talks about the use of digital technology, which is also plain and simple, that I will not waste time on this. So that brings us to the end of the third chapter also, right? uh, I have one more chapter to cover, one more unit, after which we will come to the end of this. And here we will be looking at the newsroom and setup of television. Okay, I'll take a break of 5 minutes and then we'll join again. So everybody, let's get back to the last unit of this um, block, which talks about newsroom setup of an electronic media organization. So there are, just like a print media organization, an electronic media organization runs on various aspects which are, particular to electronic media, like the instead of having a sub editor or the editing desk, here we have assignment desk or input desk, who will oversee. Please excuse me for a bit. There is a call, official call I need to attend. Yeah, I'm sorry for this. Um, so in electronic media, in this unit, what we are basically looking at is how this is different as compared to a print media organization, the newspaper that we just talked about. So news production in yeah. So here in this area, we are going to talk about news production in a news channel, and I think this is the issue here. Am I audible? Is it all good with you? I
Yes,
just
very well.
all
You are
right.
very audible. Yes, thanks.
Fine. Fine. Thank you. So the video programs are produced by producers, and they have a whole group of people who work on the assignment desk, the input desk. Input desk is just like in a newspaper we have a sub editor, and a news reporter brings in the reports, the news reports to the sub editor, who then will sit on it, who will there are many sub editors. Similarly, on an input desk, when a copy comes or the video comes, it has to be distributed to people according to their specialization. So if somebody has a background of business and economics, all the business and economic stories will go there, just like it happened in the newspaper organization. So there are two production branches in a TV news channel. First is the news gathering, and the second is the people, the team who works on making that raw footage, the raw news into a finished good, which can be broadcasting through the radio or TV or the digital arms of these. So newsroom comes into the picture at the second stage, when a reporter has done his news gathering and has prepared the raw footage. Then people, the team who that works on it, is the is taking it forward. So there is a story which is a rundown story. In some channels, it is also known as run order. Now, this is what is a run order. We have the raw footage, we have some crawls, we have certain suggested headlines, and the credits. So, all of this has to be pictured together. So, while you have your raw footage, you're going to make it a finished good. You're also going to decide what kind of headline it is going to run under, right? So what is the kind of narrative that the news channel is going to give it? All these aspects have to be looked at. So this run order is only a combination of various things. So you are giving the raw footage, also you're handing over the headlines, also the crawls, also the video, also the credits, also everything. So overseeing the reporters is important, because on the assignment or the input desk how what kind of a story has come, how is it making sense. So that is the reason why whenever we talk about fake news or information overload or stuff that is promulgated by the mainstream media, which is not correct, is because they have the raw footage with them which they can manipulate in the way they like and accordingly transform public opinion about an issue. So but nevertheless, when we're talking of the setup of a newsroom, we are talking of who is doing what. So, like, there are some overseeing reporters. These are the people who will look at the story, who will see what are the aspects that should be, what are the aspects that should be highlighted. Like we were talking about 5Ws and an H in a newspaper. What is the highlight of the story if we are going to run it for, say, for example, only 30 seconds? As compared to a detailed package where you are going to make a 5-minute script on it and then run it through and through. So that happens on its social media arm, as compared to the news channel where you only are allowed maybe 30 seconds, sometimes 1 minute of time, if it is an important story then. And then arranging the visuals. How do you want them arranged? What part do you want to cut out? That is what goes into manipulating of news. And then arranging phone in interviews also happens. So if you would look at how the news is run on a TV channel, you would see that while the news is run, the anchor will also talk to an expert. So after running the package which has been prepared by the team, the production team, for 2 minutes, then they will discuss it for a short while, and then they will go to an expert, if it is a political science expert or a sociology expert or anybody, economic expert, and then they will take their opinion in the light of the package that they presented earlier, and in the light of the interview that they did with this expert online or in the studio. Then they will analyze it for you and ask questions and create a certain kind of opinion for the public. So story planning, what should be depicted, is all a part of this. Then similar, now so far I was talking about the input desk. We also have an output desk. Output desk is the place where the final story is prepared. So while we are executing the rundown, like, okay, when we are preparing the final story, what are the various things that will be required? Like I said, a headline and an anchor link, which will in short tell you what is the speciality of this story and why are we looking at it. Then what are the various other news stories which are coming in tandem after it. The discussion with the guest or a reporter or expert, like what I just said, or the teaser before the commercial break. So like the anchor would say, stay with us for a 5-minute break and we will tell you about how the situation is in Israel as of now. Yeah, so this is a kind of teaser they have given right before the commercial break. And then how do you come back after, and how do you welcome the viewers again? You again go back to the headlines and then the news stories, and then the bulletin ends. So this is the pattern of a rundown story, which is what the output desk looks into. It prepares. So what kind of, okay, there is also some kind of information that is called super. Super is when the story is being, say for example, the Ukraine-Russia war is being shown, and the narrative on half the screen, the anchor is sitting and analyzing it for you or telling you facts about it, or what Putin has said or what Zelensky has said. They're talking all about it. Meanwhile, you will see some crawls or super on the screen, which would be additional information. So many people are dead till now. It's already been 2 years since the war began, and NATO is completely supporting Zelensky. So on. So this part, which the anchor is discussing, other than that, 2-3 information bullets will keep going on as scrolls, which are called super. Okay, so this is again some information on the screen, additional information. So while these tickers, super is there, tickers are there, and about all of it is mentioned here in your this thing, in your unit. You please go through it and then try and locate these when you look at the TV bulletin whenever you go through it. All right. So while we are talking about tickers, we are talking about super. There is one more aspect to this, which is the script desk. The script desk is the desk which comprises of the senior and highly experienced reporters and journalists, or people who are writing the final script of the story. And only those people write this kind of a script who have an in-depth knowledge on what kind of implication can such a story have on the social framework or on the economic, political, legal framework of the country. Plus, they also have to have an excellent command on language, because the same words may carry different meanings when used differently. So, in normal situations, the reporters would write their script themselves, but obviously they will be overlooked by a senior reporter, which is the script desk, to get it checked, and whatever changes need to be made get made there and then. Right. So outstation reporters also send their scripts through emails and all, and that too keeps getting checked. Now, the editor will not just go through how the story is or what kind of a flavor it is producing. They will also cross-check the facts. They will also try and verify what and get further clarification from the reporter. Right. So at times, script editors have to write full script when the story is being prepared for at the desk only. So there are times, like whenever we look at analysis, whenever we look at panel discussions or comments or things like that, those are the stories that do not require any field footage, right? Or something of enormous magnanimity or importance has taken place. Now it is time to reflect over it and know how this has been, how this is going to affect the economic thread of the country, or how it is going to affect the economics of the entire globe. That those are the kind of things which require an in-depth understanding and a good skill of analysis. So this is done at the desk itself. It does not require a field job. So here the full script is being prepared by the script desk only. And then how a newsroom functions. That's your next topic and maybe the last topic. Yes. When we talk about a newsroom, every morning, there is a phone conference, just the way it happens in a newspaper. There is a conference with the editor, with deciding upon what are the top stories for the day. And of course, the prime time news bulletin comes only in the evening. So in the morning, it is less important stories, sometimes also stories that are more soft in nature. Okay, while I was talking of hard and soft news, I think I did not inundicate about what is the difference between a hard and soft news. So a hard story is a story which must be published immediately with immediate effect, and a soft story is something which can even be published after a week or after a particular span of time, maybe 15 days also. So hard and soft news or hard and soft stories are bifurcated depending upon how important is their embargo, the time of publication, right? So with that, we come to the end of this. In the end, you will also find some TV newsroom vocabulary. Like, what do we call a package? A package is a ready story, which has been edited, in which everything, it is complete, with the headline, the ticker, the super, the narrative, and the video, and everything, credits, everything is in it. Anchor link, what is an anchor link? So, and what is a voiceover? A narrative where you're looking at a different video, and a voice is something you're listening to. That's a voiceover. And what else? Phono. A phono is a phone in interview. When a person is not present in studio and you are connecting with him or her on phone, that's called a phono. And then outdoor broadcasting. There are outdoor OB vans, there are outdoor broadcasting vans. Now, of course, the trend is going because Mojo is coming, mobile journalism. That's the newest thing that's happening. So, but still, the channels still have their OB vans with which they cover. So it is an entire van which will go to a place and put their cameras at various angles and cover, while the journalist, the reporter, is talking on the mic and talking to others who are around. So that's an OB van. Then there is a master control room, which they call an MCR. There is feed, all sorts of inputs which is coming on the input desk is called feed. and PCR is a production control room. Then story dump is when all the stories which have been edited from everywhere and have to be readied into a final package, that's called the story dump. And then ingest, which is the process of bringing deleted or lapsed stories again into the system. Sometimes it so happens that whatever you thought was important, you deleted the rest, and later on you figure out that there is either you have to do a part 2 of the story, or there is something more meaningful which has been missed out, which was there in the initial research. So you go back and you look for that lab story. Sometimes it is also there, it also has some archival value sometimes. So you also create a story and put it in the archive, so that tomorrow when you have to either produce a proof for yourself or for some historical record, if you want to keep it, it is there in the archives. So with that, we come to the end of the first block of reporting techniques. And yes, for the next class, I will see the schedule and I will get it posted on the LMS as to when we are having our next class. Okay, if it is on Saturday, we'll be having it on Saturday. So I guess I will just give me a minute, and I think meanwhile, if there is some question you need to ask, please go ahead while I check. Okay. According to the schedule, I do not have a class lined up with you on the weekend anymore. So I'll get a message dropped on LMS looking at the my week's schedule. So probably, when can we have one? I'd let you know. I'll get a message dropped on the LMS. All right. So that is it for the day. If there are any questions to be asked, please feel free. From my side, we end the first block. Were you able to follow today's session? Anything that you thought was not clear or needs a repeat, please do let me know.
Yeah, so I was following it. It was so clear to me. And thank you so much for the insight. Right.
Thank you. Fine, then let us end the class now. Thank you all very much for joining in, and I will get another message left on the LMS for your next class. Thank you all. Good evening from India. Bye-bye.
Right. Good morning here from Ghana. Bye bye. But I don't know. Are you on our WhatsApp page? Maybe some of the information you can be dropping through that place.
Yeah, I don't think we have a WhatsApp group here. Is there a WhatsApp group?
Yes. So let me quickly share the links for you to join.
Yeah, that would be good.
We've created a WhatsApp group.
Or what you can do is, here is my number, WhatsApp number.
Okay. So you send me your WhatsApp number, then I will drop it there.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. So if you have any issue information, you can just drop it there. Then we'll pick it up. Thank you so much.
That would be very nice.
Yeah.
Absolutely nice. Yeah. Fine. So bye-bye, everybody. Till we meet again for the next class. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Where's your phone? Where is your phone? I've sent you money there.